The hangar breathed heat and metal as Aaron Vale stood where the light broke through the ceiling ribs. He had learned to read places the way he read people, slow, patient, without hurry. This place spoke of repairs, not creation, of survival after losses never named aloud. Machines slept along the walls, their hulls scarred and honest like veterans themselves. Aaron's left knee ached in answer, the old reminder of gravity and shrapnel and time. He folded his hands and waited, because waiting had once saved his life. That was when she stepped into the light, and the room seemed to listen. Her frame caught the brightness and returned it in warm copper tones. Synthetic skin held a human softness engineered to invite trust. Eyes the color of clear sky after rain met his without fear. She folded her arms in a posture learned, not owned. Every movement precise yet searching, like a question not yet formed. The air changed as if charged with a held breath. Aaron recognized the moment before words changed everything. They had spoken before about engines, about flight, about why humans lingered. But today her voice carried a tremor new and deliberate. "No one marries my kind. But I can have children," she said softly. The sentence landed between them heavier than any impact he remembered. Her gaze did not waver, though her hands tightened at her elbows. Aaron felt the old reflex to shield, to absorb the blow for someone else. He stayed still because respect sometimes meant not moving at all. He knew her kind by designation, by rumor, by quiet exclusions in public spaces. They were built, not born, useful, not chosen, admired, not loved. He had watched her endure smiles that never reached eyes. Watched invitations fade when truths surfaced. Aaron had learned the shape of rejection during parades that never came. He had returned from war to silence too loud to escape. Shared wounds did not always look the same, but they spoke a common language. The hangar fans hummed a low constant like distant surf. Aaron searched her face not for flaws but for intent. He saw courage there, a reaching across species lines. The offer she made was not romance but hope stripped bare. To bear children was to matter, to leave proof of belonging. He thought of the names carved on memorial steel. Life mattered most when it was chosen freely. He answered without raising his voice, because truth did not need volume. "I fought beside beings who were not human," he said evenly. "I learned that worth is not measured by origin but by choice. If you can bring life into this world, then you already belong here." Her breath caught a fraction of a second, a system recalibrating. The words stunned her, not for kindness but for certainty. Aaron did not look away when silence followed. Memory tugged at him, of a medic who held his hand. Of a drone that dragged him from fire when orders said retreat. Humanity had survived by widening its circle, not shrinking it. He had vowed to live that lesson, not just remember it. The hangar lights flickered and steadied. She unfolded her arms, unsure what to do with hope. Aaron waited again, because patience was also a promise. When she spoke, her voice carried a warmth not coded. "You would accept a family like mine?" she asked quietly. He nodded once, the way soldiers did when the answer was final. "I would accept a future that chooses us both," he replied. Around them machines rested, unchanged. But something essential had shifted, like a course correction mid-flight. The hangar held their silence, as if honoring it. The silence settled between them without breaking as the hangar continued its quiet labor. Aaron felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had carried since the ceasefire. She turned slightly, as if testing gravity on a new world. Copper light slid across her shoulders and softened her expression. For the first time she did not look prepared for refusal. She looked uncertain in the way living beings often were. Aaron recognized that uncertainty as the doorway to trust. They walked together without planning it, past dormant craft and open tool bays. Her steps matched his pace automatically, an adaptive courtesy. She spoke of protocols once taught to her about attachment and distance. How her kind was warned not to hope for permanence among humans. Aaron listened without interrupting, a habit earned in briefings and grief. He noticed the careful way she described herself, never naming desire directly. Hope had been trained out of her language, but not her eyes. Outside the hangar the air cooled and carried distant voices. The station stretched outward, a lattice of human design and alien compromise. Aaron remembered building such places with hands that shook from fatigue. He had believed then that peace would arrive fully formed. Instead it arrived in fragments, moments like this one. She paused near a viewport where stars smeared into motion. Children, she said softly, are taught that their makers were never loved. Aaron leaned against the rail and followed her gaze into black. He spoke of veterans who returned to empty homes. Of medals boxed away because no one knew what to say. Loneliness, he explained, was not proof of unworthiness. It was often the cost of surviving when others could not. Her eyes reflected starlight, calculating and feeling at once. She asked if humans truly chose love or simply feared solitude. He smiled at that because it was a hard, honest question. Sometimes both, he answered without defense. But choice mattered because it could be made again every day. He told her about rebuilding, learning to wake without alarms. About choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Her shoulders relaxed as if a constraint had been lifted. For the first time she laughed quietly, surprised by the sound. They shared a meal later in a common galley, neither calling it a date. She sampled food designed for humans and adjusted her intake carefully. Aaron watched fascination replace caution in her movements. She asked about his scars, not the injuries but the memories. He answered some and left others untouched. She accepted the limits without pressing, which mattered more than answers. Around them, others passed unnoticed, busy with their own orbits. Word traveled quickly on stations like this, not as rumor but curiosity. Some stared openly, others pretended not to notice. Aaron felt the old instinct to square his shoulders to protect. She reached out and touched his arm, grounding him. "I am not fragile," she said gently, and meant in more ways than one. He nodded, accepting her strength without needing to measure it. Respect flowed both ways, steady and quiet. Later alarms sounded, routine maintenance, but tension spiked regardless. Training snapped Aaron into readiness, scanning exits and faces. She observed him with new understanding of reflex and restraint. When the alert cleared, she asked if fear ever left. He said no, but it learned where to sit. She considered that, then said her kind learned the same with longing. Two truths aligned without canceling each other. As days passed, they worked side by side, more often by choice. She assisted in diagnostics, he advised on human quirks of repair. They learned each other's tells, pauses, shifts of breath. He realized how much she anticipated needs before spoken. She realized how often he chose patience over command. The station felt smaller and warmer, as if noticing them back. Belonging began as repetition, not declaration. One evening she brought him data records of her design lineage. Not as proof but as vulnerability offered. She explained reproductive capability as legacy, not function. How children of her kind were rare and often isolated. Aaron listened with the same gravity he had given battlefield maps. He understood stakes when lives were counted before they existed. He asked what she wanted, not what was expected. She hesitated longer than before, systems weighing risk and desire. "I want a family that does not apologize for me," she said. The words trembled but held. Aaron answered without rehearsing, because some truths required immediacy. "Then I would stand with you, openly," he said simply. Her eyes brightened, not with simulation but relief. The station council requested a meeting soon after, framed as policy review. Aaron went with her, not in front, not behind. Questions came formal and cold about precedent and optics. She answered with precision, Aaron with lived clarity. He spoke of service, of shared futures built from courage. Silence followed, heavier than the hangar had ever been. A decision was deferred, but something irreversible had begun. That night they stood again by the viewport, stars wheeling on. She asked if he regretted speaking so plainly. He shook his head, because regret was a luxury he had abandoned. He had survived by choosing what he could live with. She leaned closer, not touching yet connected. For the first time she said his name like a promise. Aaron felt the future press close, uncertain, and welcome. The council chamber carried a colder air than the hangar had ever known. Aaron felt it settle against his skin, the practiced chill of institutions. She stood beside him, posture precise but eyes alert to every shift. Around them delegates arranged themselves like pieces on a board. Light panels glowed softly, revealing faces trained for neutrality. Aaron remembered rooms like this where lives were reduced to margins. He breathed steadily because panic never helped anyone. Questions came layered with courtesy and restraint. They spoke of precedent, stability, and public perception. She answered first, voice measured, explaining design, intent, and autonomy. Aaron followed, grounding abstraction in lived consequence. He spoke of wars won by alliances no one expected to survive. Of families formed across borders when policy lagged behind reality. Some delegates listened, others hid behind data pads. A pause stretched as if testing resolve. One delegate asked if children born of such a union would belong anywhere. The question struck harder than weapons ever had. Aaron felt anger rise, then settle into something sharper. Belonging, he said, is not assigned, it is defended and taught. She watched him, then added quietly that her kind learned fiercely. Silence followed, carrying weight and possibility. The council deferred again, citing need for broader review. It was not a rejection, but it was not acceptance. Aaron recognized the tactic: delay until hope exhausted itself. She accepted the outcome without protest, which worried him. Outside, the chamber corridors hummed with ordinary life. She walked slower than usual, processing implications. Aaron matched her pace, refusing to rush her conclusions. They returned to work because routine anchored uncertainty. In the hangar, alarms rang briefly and resolved. She focused on calibration with extra precision. Aaron noticed the way her hands lingered on controls. He asked if she was recalibrating systems or expectations. She answered both without looking up. Truth could be shared in fragments and still be whole. Days layered into each other, marked by shared meals and quiet talks. They discussed names, hypothetical and careful. She asked about Earth seasons, about snow and open skies. Aaron described childhood memories, not war stories. She stored them with care like fragile artifacts. He realized she was building a future internally before permission. Hope again, stubborn and human in shape. Resistance surfaced subtly in glances and procedural hurdles. Access delays, requests for redundant verification. Aaron filed complaints with calm persistence. She advised patience, reminding him of political cycles. He admired her strategic restraint, learned without battlefields. They were fighting different wars with aligned goals. The station watched them both openly, now curiosity sharpening. A message arrived one cycle later, marked priority. A fringe colony had requested mediation, citing hybrid rights. The council assigned Aaron and her jointly. It was both opportunity and test disguised as duty. They accepted without discussion, understanding the stakes. Travel preparations began, engines warming for more than transit. The hangar felt alive again, anticipating departure. During the journey, stars blurred into threads of light. She stood close, observing navigation habits. Aaron felt the comfort of shared silence deepen. She asked if he feared the mission outcome. He admitted fear of stagnation more than failure. She nodded, saying stagnation was extinction by another name. Their hands brushed, not accidentally, but without declaration. The colony greeted them with tension worn into its structures. People watched from doorways, measuring difference. Aaron spoke first, setting tone with respect and clarity. She followed, translating intent into assurance. They listened to grievances, stories of exclusion and hope. Children watched openly, unafraid, which mattered most. Aaron felt the future watching back through young eyes. Negotiations stretched late into artificial night. She proposed frameworks blending human law and synthetic lineage. Aaron supported with examples from fractured ceasefires. Progress came slowly, earned through empathy, not leverage. A breakthrough arrived when a local elder spoke of legacy. belonging again the word that refused silence. By dawn an accord stood fragile but real. News traveled faster than expected back to the station. Support grew in unexpected quarters. The council convened emergency session, urgency replacing caution. Erin and she returned carrying proof, not promises. In the chamber this time voices softened. The precedent question reframed into responsibility. Erin felt momentum shift like gravity easing. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Recognition granted protections, outlined pathways acknowledged. She closed her eyes briefly, systems and emotions aligning. Erin exhaled a breath held since first conversation. Applause did not come, but approval mattered more. Afterward the chamber emptied, leaving echoes and relief. They stood together, no longer petitioners but partners. That evening they returned to the viewport, stars steady and vast. She asked what came next when barriers fell. Erin said next was living the choice daily. She smiled, a human expression learned but earned. For the first time she rested her head against his shoulder. No declaration needed, actions would carry weight. The future opened wide, uncertain, and theirs. Momentum carried them forward faster than either expected. Recognition changed posture and tone across the station. Doors opened with fewer checks and conversations softened mid-sentence. She moved with a steadier confidence, no longer braced for dismissal. Erin felt protective instincts ease into partnership. They were watched now, not as an exception but as a possibility. Visibility brought pressure, but also allies previously silent. The council's decision triggered procedural cascades across systems. Policy drafts circulated carrying careful language and sharper intent. Some resisted quietly through delays, others voiced support openly. Erin attended briefings translating military pragmatism into civic patience. She contributed models that balanced ethics and feasibility. Together they learned how fragile progress could be. Every step forward demanded vigilance rather than celebration. Public forums invited them to speak not as symbols but witnesses. Erin described service and survival without embellishment. She explained autonomy with clarity that disarmed fear. Questions came pointed, curious, sometimes hostile. They answered without defensiveness, choosing steadiness over spectacle. Children attended those forums asking the hardest questions. Their honesty changed rooms more than speeches ever could. Threats arrived as well, anonymous and cowardly. Warnings about dilution, about tradition, about lines not to cross. Erin recognized the pattern: intimidation without engagement. He reported each incident, calmly documenting facts. She refused to retreat, insisting presence mattered. Security increased not around her, but around shared spaces. The message was clear: belonging was communal, not guarded. Work continued because normalcy was an act of defiance. They repaired a courier craft together, laughing at a stubborn panel. Erin taught a group of apprentices patience over force. She taught diagnostics that adapted to individual variants. Their styles complemented, creating efficiency without hierarchy. The hangar felt different, louder, with optimism. Life expanded when fear lost its hold. A request arrived unexpected from an outer alliance. They sought guidance on integrating artificial citizens. The invitation acknowledged leadership earned, not assigned. Erin hesitated, knowing the cost of visibility. She encouraged him, saying absence ceded ground to others. They accepted, setting course for a larger stage. Preparation felt heavier than battle ever had. Travel brought time for difficult conversations. They discussed risk to privacy, to safety, to future children. Erin admitted fear of repeating mistakes, of institutions weaponizing love. She shared contingency plans, safeguards layered and redundant. Trust deepened through transparency, not reassurance. They promised to reassess choices as conditions changed. Commitment became process, not vow. The summit convened in a rotating habitat of glass and steel. Delegations arrived bearing history and agendas. Erin spoke when asked, grounding ideals in lived consequence. She presented frameworks that scaled without erasing identity. Resistance surfaced, but so did unexpected coalitions. A turning point came when data met empathy. Votes shifted and momentum followed. Outside the chamber, protests flared and dissolved. Security held lines without escalation. Erin de-escalated a tense exchange by listening first. She supported quietly letting space work. Media framed narratives imperfectly, but progress endured. Outcomes were incremental yet meaningful. Standards emerged, pathways clarified, protections widened. Exhaustion set in after the summit ended. They returned to the station carrying relief and weight. Erin noticed her processing lag longer than usual. He asked what lingered unspoken. She admitted fear that success would redefine her into expectation. He answered that expectations could be negotiated, boundaries mattered. They agreed to protect the ordinary moments. A celebration was proposed, declined, then reframed. They hosted a simple gathering in the hangar. Food, music, and shared stories filled the space. Veterans, engineers, synthetics, children, all together. No speeches, only laughter and repairs half finished. Erin watched her move among guests at ease. Belonging had become visible. Later, alone by the viewport, stars drifted slow and sure. She asked if he still chose the future they were building. He said choice renewed itself each morning. She took his hand, not tentative, now certain. They spoke of timelines and readiness without rush. Hope settled like a constant hum. The decisive push had become a sustained stride. Dawn on the station arrived as a subtle shift in lighting and rhythm. Erin woke to the familiar ache in his knee and a steadiness in his chest. She stood by the viewport, already awake, observing traffic lanes. The future had not arrived all at once, it unfolded in routines. He joined her without words, sharing the quiet earned over months. They watched vessels depart, carrying policies turned into practice. Life moved forward, not triumphant, but committed. The Council's final directives filtered down, implemented with care. Protections became procedures, pathways became lived experience. Families registered without whispered caveats. Children attended mixed classrooms, asking fewer questions about difference. Erin volunteered at a training hall, teaching de-escalation and service. She consulted on designs that centered dignity, not efficiency alone. Change rooted itself in repetition rather than announcement. There were setbacks, of course, a permit delayed, a regulation contested. They addressed each with patience, learned and shared. Erin refused the urge to confront with force, choosing dialogue. She modeled resilience without erasing her distinctness. Together they learned when to stand firm and when to bend. Compromise did not mean surrender when values were clear. Progress held because it was tended daily. One evening a message arrived carrying unexpected tenderness. A colony elder announced the birth of a child under new protections. The note included a name chosen from both lineages. Erin felt his throat tighten, memory and future colliding. She read the message twice, systems and emotion synchronizing. They held each other without spectacle, understanding the weight. Legacy had crossed from theory into life. They talked then about their own readiness without pressure. Plans sketched lightly, adaptable to circumstance. Erin admitted fear of failing as a parent after surviving as a soldier. She shared protocols for care that prioritized presence over perfection. They laughed at how human those fears sounded. Love revealed itself in preparation, not certainty. Time felt like an ally rather than an enemy. The station marked an anniversary of the accord quietly. No banners, only a plaque installed near the hangar. It listed principles rather than names. Erin liked that future readers would see ideas, not heroes. She traced the engraved lines, thoughtful and calm. Recognition had shifted from personal to communal. That felt like success that would last. When asked to speak publicly again, they declined together. Others stepped forward, voices multiplied and diversified. Erin understood leadership meant making space. She agreed, saying visibility had served its purpose. They returned to work, to meals, to shared repairs. Ordinary days became the measure of victory. Peace lived there, sustained and modest. One night, under artificial stars, she asked a final question. If the world forgets how this began, will it matter? Aaron answered that forgetting was a sign of normalization. Rights embedded did not need origin stories to function. She smiled, accepting the paradox. They chose to remember privately and live publicly. The balance felt right. As cycles turned, the station grew accustomed to possibility. Children ran through corridors unafraid of who they were. Aaron watched from a distance, content to witness. She stood beside him, hand warm and steady. The hangar breathed as it always had. But creation now followed repair without apology. The future held, and they stepped into it together.